Welcome to Persons of Interest. My name is Derek Dockett. My guest in this episode is someone that I first connected with several years ago. I've read a lot of content by him, and I've heard him speak in person several times. I wasn't quite sure how to give him the proper introduction because he's done so much and continues to do so much. I really wanted this to come off the right way. But once I visited his website and saw his own bio again, I thought, well, that's the perfect intro for this podcast. He wrote a best-selling book on leadership. He founded Fieldhouse Media, which helps college athletes, coaches, and administrators be better on social media. He's helping leaders and teams create a championship culture with his project known as Culture Wins. He's presented and spoken on more than 180 college campuses and national conventions over the past 8 years. He's been quoted by places like ESPN, the New York Times, and USA Today. He drinks a lot of coffee, he reads a lot of books, and he runs a lot of miles. This is Kevin DeShazo on Persons of Interest. Kevin, thanks so much for taking time. I guess I don't know how to properly introduce you because I feel like you're doing so much these days, and I definitely want to catch up and figure out what's new because I know there's some things with Giant going on. But welcome. It's good to see you, buddy.
Good to hang out. The best introduction, I think, is no introduction, right? It was like, I don't know what we're doing, but here we are. We're going to hang out. We've known each other now for almost a decade.
Isn't that weird?
Which is super, and it's weird to say that to people that you only know from the internet.
Yeah. Well, we see each other.
I mean, we've hung out in person.
Yeah. Like when you come to St. Louis and, I picked you up from the airport. We've been to Pappy's getting barbecue and
we've had food. We've met in person, but it's not like, went to high school. Like we've been for 10 years now. It's like we met on the internet and it's been probably 9 years. And I don't remember how it started. I'm sure it probably has something to do with COSIDA.
Sure.
Something about social media and college sports, because then COSIDA was in St. Louis.
Yeah,
the first year that I spoke at it. Yep. So that was the first time we met in person.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the beginnings before that.
So I don't feel bad.
I don't remember yesterday, to be fair.
Well, you're traveling. We'll get into that too. You're all over the place. But I don't feel as bad that you don't remember either, but that's good. That's okay. But like I said, I preface it with just starting with Fieldhouse Media because I think for me, that's the one thing that I definitely connected with the most. But now I feel like you've got more than just that going on, talking about leadership. I just always appreciate after hearing you talk in person and how you talk not only to student athletes, but just in general, the presentation, it always strikes with me. And that's why one reason I subscribe to the daily newsletter, which is great. The book, you're an author. I'm trying to hit all the things you've done. I guess I should just look at your Twitter account and get the details there. Speaker, author, consultant. I don't know. You're all over the country. Let's start here. Traveling. How, in one calendar year, let's just take a calendar year, maybe 2018, how many miles do you think you traveled? Is that a tough question, or do you know, cities?
Thanks to the, hold on, I'm live tweeting this, by the way. So
perfect.
What are we talking about? Travel schedule. Let me show you. So little promo. This is not paid, but free advertisement for a mighty little app known as TripIt. So it tracks every time I book a flight or a hotel or a car, it puts it into this app to organize it because I'm terrible at organization. And this puts all my reservations in one spot, gives me notifications, makes sure I'm where I need to be as much as it possibly can. So with that said, last year, now this is just miles flown.
Sure.
If I'm driving, it's not keeping track of that. Right. Last year, I flew 37,585 miles. To compare, 2017, I flew 21,000 miles.
Wow.
So a little bit of almost double.
Yeah.
I probably drove another 10,000 last year.
What's the furthest you drove?
Furthest I've driven?
Yeah, drove. I'm good with English, aren't I?
English, words are hard, man. We're professionals here.
And I work in a school district, so the teachers that listen will be very impressed.
Grammar nerds, leave us alone. The farthest I've driven for work, probably maybe St. Louis.
Okay, so you keep it in a pretty
if it's under 7 hours, I'll drive.
Okay.
Typically, not always, but most of the time I'll drive if it's under 7 hours. I mean, last year for vacation we drove to the Grand Canyon. So I mean, that was like a 2-day drive, but that wasn't work related. So probably 7-ish hours.
Okay.
Most driving trips are under 5.
I think, I have like about a 5 to 8 hour max of driving, and
that's right.
It's got to cut into 2 days, and
because at that point it's it's obviously it's cheaper than flying, and and schools are paying for me to travel, but I don't want to put that burden on them.
Sure.
But it's also, like today I'm in Emporia, Kansas, as we talk. I just got done speaking to student athletes at Emporia State. 3.5 hour drive, no big deal. I think they told me it's an hour 45 from the Kansas City airport. And Kansas City from Oklahoma City, a flight is probably 45 minutes. But by the time I would have left, driven to the Oklahoma City airport, gone through security, dealt with all that stuff, flown to Kansas City, dealt with security there, got in a rental car. It's probably faster to make that drive.
Yeah, you save yourself the headache of going through lines, and of course now, the government's back open now, but that wild card of flying.
Thankfully, that finished, because I'm just getting into my busy season. It's just now kicking off. This week, and I was legitimately getting worried, and obviously care more about people who are impacted, like actual workers. I'm like, man, for someone who travels for work, this is going to be a serious inconvenience. So for now, who knows when this airs? Probably 2025. But the government may shut down again. Let's keep that thing open.
For more reasons than that too. Obviously.
For a variety of reasons.
Yes. So all right. So you mentioned you talked to student athletes all over the country. And let's start there, because I think that's probably the foundation of where you started and where you sort of, hit a zone that's resonated with people and college and universities across the country, is that you talk to them about social media, using it the right way. But I want to hear it in your words and let people know, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is I want to tell stories of people I find interesting that are doing interesting things. Social media is one of those tools that has evolved. I mean, think about when we first met, almost 10 years ago, what Twitter and Facebook, what they've become now in 2018. I mean, there's so much angst and disgust with Facebook these days, and what people do on Twitter. I mean, the articles, like there's one a day of an athlete, a professional athlete, a high school student, you name it, a teacher, whoever it is, that tweeted something, retweeted something, liked something, and someone saw it, and they were fired and whatever. Your job, well, I don't even call it a job. You're an advocate of, be careful, know what you're doing, know your why, know the purpose of what you're doing. In your words, tell these people that are listening of what you do when you go out and talk to student athletes about social media.
Yeah. So for me, and I'll go back to the beginning, the reason I started Fieldhouse, I was a sports fan on Twitter, and that was essentially it. I was doing some social media consulting, but I was mostly just a sports fan on Twitter. And I kept seeing in my timeline student athletes either getting in trouble, making negative headlines for putting something inappropriate, something dumb, something immature, something offensive on social media. And what was resulting from that was coaches banning it, just a lot of negative conversation around this idea of student athletes and social media, and administrators wanted control, coaches wanted control. Let's just shut everything down. And to me, that didn't make sense. And it was fear-based, because they were ignorant of it. And I don't mean that as a negative. It was just so new.
Right. They
just didn't fully understand it. And so the response when we don't understand things is we're afraid of them. Let's eliminate them. And so that was the idea of administrators and coaches with student athletes on social media. And I thought that doesn't make sense, because I was seeing a lot of people around me use social media for good things, building awareness for their product, for their book, just building community, what these tools were actually supposedly created for. And I thought, why can it be good for all these people and it has to be terrible for this one group? And so started just talking and writing about this idea that social media is not the bad guy for student athletes. Let's make it useful, both for them today as a student athlete and tomorrow as they step into the real world as a productive citizen, maybe as a professional athlete, but as a doctor, as a teacher, as a salesperson, as whatever it is they're going to do in the world, social media can be a benefit. So let's help them understand, yes, the risks. Words are hard. I think we said that. I've been talking for like 2 hours tonight. Help them understand the risks of using social media inappropriately, but more so the value that comes from using it on purpose.
Yeah. And over time, one part I love about when you do have these talks and you go out and I've seen it, you've been in a big classroom setting or conference room or whatever it is, and you've got a presentation and you go through the basics, you show the case studies, you show, look what happened to this person. But the part that I always love, that I always give you, I don't know if you still do it, but when you go through, you've never seen any of these student athletes that you're getting ready to talk to, and you just do a basic search on Twitter and you don't follow them, they don't follow you, but you find these tweets that may be offensive to people that these student athletes have tweeted, and you're like, hey, you realize this is what you're tweeting. These are your fellow teammates, classmates. Any of these raise an eyebrow. I got to imagine you've done this now hundreds of times. The reactions are probably pretty priceless. And you ever see, I guess my question is, what's the one that sort of caught you off guard of how the groups have reacted? I mean, I seen one at a couple of the schools in the Missouri Valley Conference, and it's kind of like, oh, they're laughing, they're blushing, they're turning red. They know who's who. When you're up there standing giving that presentation, how does that reaction hit you?
Yeah, so part of what I like to do with these sessions is, student athletes, they don't expect to enjoy these talks, right? They get speakers that come in for everything, like, oh, another speaker, and this one's about social media. It's just going to be negative, and he's going to tell us to not be dumb and not screw up and blah, 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 which is obviously not my perspective because I love social media. Right. So I like to come in and let them know, like, hey, we're going to have fun. I'm not here to tell you what not to do. I love social media, so I'm not here to tell you you're spending too much time on it. Like, let's look at how to use it well. And one of the things I love is that at the end, one of the most common comments I get is, man, I really didn't want to come to this tonight. I was not looking forward to this. This was awesome. Like, great. Hopefully you learned something too. But it's like, it was engaging. It was fun. Right. And part of that is, at every school I go to, finding the worst posts I can find from those student athletes and putting them up on the screen. And I blur their names out because I'm not trying to shame them. And you're right. I don't follow them. They don't follow me. I didn't get a list of their Twitter handles from their administration. It's like I just went on Twitter and found these within 5 minutes. And to show them, like, I have your best interest in mind. I'm here to help you, here to serve you. Imagine you were going for a job interview and that employer turned the screen around at his computer at his desk, and this is your Twitter account. It's like game over at that point. And so for 18 to 22, 23-year-olds, these are hilarious, right? Like, if you can imagine it, I've seen it. I've put it on the screen. I mean, we're talking sexual, drug use, all sorts of terrible things. The entire gamut. I mean, it's just, like I said, if you can imagine it, I've seen it and put it on the screen, and they just think it's the funniest thing in the world. And so sitting up on stage, it's amazing to watch them, and they're pointing at each other. It's like, oh, that's you. Oh, Jeff, that one's yours. And so it's funny to watch them, like, really, because they all follow each other. Like, even though the names are blurred out, they follow each other. They know who it is. Right. And then I kind of shift to, usually it takes them a second. So I'll say, hey, these are your tweets. And they're kind of looking, and then somebody's like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, yeah, people in this room, these are your, oh. So then it shifts from like, this is really funny to like, wait a minute. So I'll ask them, like, how many of you before 30 minutes ago had ever heard of my name? I'm like, none of them. And I'm like, I don't know you either. I don't follow you. You don't know me. And look what I found out about you. Right. And so then all of a sudden it clicks like, oh, this just got real. The funniest situation from that, and it's always fun when administrators are in the room, because student athletes think it's hilarious. Administrators, their faces go from red with just like sheer anger to white, like they just want to vomit. Like, wait a minute, the world can see these. What's happening? I need to go throw up. But I was at a school one time, and student athletes they all know again whose tweets and whose posts are whose, and so they were all pointing at this one kid like, oh, that's you, and 2 or 3 of them were pointing at this kid, and he just stands up, flips a double bird, and walks out.
Oh, okay.
I was like, oh dang, that just happened. And the AD was like, I was like, look, man, he clearly needs to be in here. Like, I didn't shame him, I didn't put his name on it. Like, he can be mad. He's the one who chose to put that on the internet. Clearly, he shouldn't be walking out of a session.
Right.
It'd be more beneficial for him to sit here. But that was pretty intense. Like, all right, double birds, I'm out. I'll see y'all next time. So that was pretty wild.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have never and it's interesting because, like I said, your whole point of your presentation is not to tell them don't do this, don't this. You tell them, here's how to do it. Think of this. The phrase I always go back to that I love, think of it as a virtual press conference where everything you say, not just media, but fans, potential employers, anybody, they can see what you're tweeting. So think about it. And you never know if that hits home, but like I said, now I always, me personally, I always tell people, I'm not going to tweet anything that I'm not tweeting anything that I'm not going to say to my mom. That's my basic, that's it.
Pretty simple. Yeah. Pretty simple standard.
Right. And otherwise, yeah. I'm just going to keep it to myself. So, I also have a personal thing that I don't do politics on Twitter because that just does nothing but enrage people.
You're not going to change someone's mind in 140 280 characters.
Yeah, 280. Yeah.
You're not going to change someone's mind.
Yeah.
And now, does that mean you shouldn't discuss it? Not necessarily. But getting into an argument over politics, it's not going to work.
Right. Is it serving its point on social media?
That's right.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's the main point I wanted to get to. But now, I know you've got some other stuff going on. Let's touch on the book real quick because has it been 3 years, 4 years since the book was published?
Well, so I'm a multiple time author. Is that proper English? Multiple
That's
time?
Right. Wow.
Leadership Interrupted. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. The first one doesn't really count. Let's be honest. It's terrible. Don't go buy it.
But here's the thing, though. The work to publish a book, had you done that before that? Had you gone through that process?
No. And let's break this down for people. Self-publishing is not difficult. So the beauty of the internet, it's made everything accessible and simple and cheap.
Sure.
So you don't need a publisher. Now, there are value, there's benefits at certain times to having a publisher, but you don't need one. You can write a book, you can have editors, you can have cover design, all these things, and get your book on the internet, have it printed in real book paper format. People can buy it without ever going through a publishing house. So first book, iAthlete, it was really, it's terrible. I should actually probably update it and do version 2.0 or something. But it was really to help establish my kind of credibility and authority in this industry of social media branding for athletes. Because when I started Fieldhouse, nobody was really doing this. There are people kind of dabbling in it, but it was nobody's full-time, this is going to be my expertise. And so that was kind of a way to help concrete my presence there. Served as I don't know, I couldn't tell how many copies it sold, wasn't a big deal. But so then Leadership Interrupted, it's only been 1.5 years.
Okay, gosh, really?
I could be lying. I don't know.
No, you're probably right.
Let's go to Amazon and see to the power of the internet. So it came out. Come on, internet. Hotel internet is the worst. # first world problems.
I'll see if I can beat you. It
came out October 8, 2017. So about 18 months ago.
Okay.
15, 16 months ago. To get numbers are hard, just like words. So what was the question about that? I don't even know where we are.
So I originally asked about the process, which you went through and said, publishing a book, the internet's made things easier. But I was more getting at the content. Because, anyone can write a book, but they actually have meaningful content in there that makes sense and that is something that people want to pick up and go through is a whole different story. That's totally. That's where I'm coming at it from.
So let's put it this way. Writing a book is a lot like Twitter. Right? Just because you can write a book doesn't mean you should. Just because you can tweet something doesn't mean you should. Part of getting way off the deep end here, but part of the oversimplification of all these things is that now everyone thinks they have to have a book.
Sure.
right? Like, again, I probably shouldn't have written iAthlete if I'm being honest. Like everyone thinks, well, I've got to have a book if I'm going to be something. It's like, no, you don't.
To be fair, everyone thinks they have to have a podcast too.
That's right. Now,
starting a podcast.
Now everyone has to have a podcast, and you've got to, started out with you had to have a website, and now you've got to have a Twitter account, and now you've got to have a book, and now you got to have a podcast. So you don't have to have any of those things.
Right.
It's okay to not write a book. It's like, so people listening, you don't have to write a book. Like, don't feel that pressure. For me, so I started, 5 years ago, I think it was. Leadership's always something I've cared about. I've always found myself in leadership positions for some reason, sometimes qualified, sometimes not. And doing all this social media stuff kind of gave me a seat at the table with ADs and coaches and administrators just to hear what's happening from a leadership and culture perspective. And I realized there's a massive gap in leader development in college sports, which is not unique to that industry, but that's my world. And I didn't know what to do with that. Didn't have any content, didn't have any systems or programs. And so I just started a daily email to kind of challenge and encourage and inspire whoever in sports wanted to sign up to read that email. And so I started that email, a daily email, Monday through Friday, probably 5 years ago. And then I started getting ADs saying, hey, will you come do a staff retreat? I'm like, nope, I don't have any content or programs. I just write an email. So sorry, can't help you. Ended up partnering with Giant Worldwide. A bunch of stuff has happened in between now and then, building out Culture Wins. But over the course of writing these daily emails, and it's been super fun. Like, I'll get email responses from people like, man, I had this one like framed, not the email itself, because that'd be a weird thing to frame, but like made it into some type of like art piece in their office.
Right.
Like, that's unbelievable. Like, that's just crazy. Because in reality is like the things I'm writing, I'm mostly writing to myself. Like, hey, Kevin, don't screw this up. Or you are screwing this thing, you're screwing this up. Maybe it'll be helpful for other people to be aware of these stories too. So it's mostly like I'm kind of talking to people, mostly talking to myself and trying to remind myself of who and what I'm trying to be. But I started having people say, hey, you should turn these into a book. I'm like, that's an interesting idea. And so I sat down and I was like, surely this is not that hard, because these are all saved. I use MailChimp for my daily email, and these are all archived in MailChimp. Now, what I didn't know is, and I'm still like, I email MailChimp monthly. Like, by the way, you need a massive export, because I can't do that. So I was like, I've got to manually get 365 emails.
Oh boy.
Like, figure out which 365 I want to use,
sure, and
copy and paste those into a book format. I was like, and again, my personality, I like big picture idea stuff. I don't like details. I don't like process. So this is not my cup of tea. So I'm like, well, what if I just did it instead of 365, let's just do it for 5 days a week, whatever that is, like 270 emails or something. So I was like, I'm going to do that. And I think it was actually Mark Hodgkin, who I do the sports leadership podcast with. It may not have been him. He was like, dude, that's ridiculous. Like, do three, like you don't market a book like 270 days of inspiration. It's like 270. Like, where'd you come up with that? Like, random number. So put it together. And here's what I love about the college sports community, is people heard that I was putting together this book, and I had several SIDs say, hey, I want to edit this for you. I was like, awesome. How much? Like, no, I just want to do this for you. I just want to serve you in this way. I'm like, that's insane. And again, if you're listening to this, if you know anything about college sports, SIDs, they are crazy overworked, undervalued humans, some of the best people on the planet. And here they are saying, like, let me take more of my time just to serve you and edit your book. And then I had people, hey, let me create quote graphic. How's that? Create. I got to figure out how to speak at some point in life. Let me create graphics for you for social media for your book. Quote graphics, promotional graphics. So people, like this community of people that have almost become like this digital family for us over the last 7, 8, 9 years. They're just like, hey, how can we help? So it was pretty wild just to see all of this come together. Again, self-published, put it on Amazon. And it's almost like a for lack of better phrasing, like a daily leadership devotional. Yeah. And now it's out in the world, and it became an Amazon bestseller, which really just sounds good for marketing. It's all about putting it in the right category.
Hey, but it matters.
It's gaming the system. That way you can say you're a bestseller. So like, it's not like it's New York Times bestsellers list, which I don't really care about those things.
Sure.
For me, it's like, is it impacting people?
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
And it's just a way to kind of get, I've made this transition. I'm talking a lot. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
I've made this kind of transition in the sports world from not just being like the social media guy, but could I be a leadership guy in the space? And so this is kind of part of making that transition into not just being social media, but being kind of leadership and culture as well.
So do you see yourself now, because it's been a while since I've talked to you, and this is one of the questions I wanted to ask. And for me, it's been a year since I've been out of college athletics, but I still get culture wins. So I'm still, because it's actually, it's more than just sports. Like it's
not a sports email. It was not designed. My audience is mostly the sports community, right, but it's not a sports themed email.
Correct. And I've shared actually some of your tweets and retweeted them with some folks, and I've seen some of the teachers and administrators in my school district actually, see them, share them themselves. So it's got multiple uses outside of sports. But question: do you see yourself now doing as many? You mentioned an AD asking you to do a retreat and a leadership retreat. Man, talking really is hard. You're like, it's contagious. Do you see yourself doing that more now these days than the social media talks with student athletes? What's the workload been like as you've been going around?
Great question. I thought that, and to give some of the backstory, so, initially the daily email was called Fieldhouse Leadership. It wasn't a company. It was just daily email. And then leaders started asking for stuff. And then I partnered with Giant Worldwide. Their co-founder, Jeremy Kubicek, my wife had worked for him years ago. He's always been a mentor. They do stuff with Google and the U.S. Air Force and Chick-fil-A and Delta, companies around the globe. And when I saw what they were doing, it was better than anything I've ever seen in the leadership space. And I said, whatever that was, I need it as a man, dad, husband, but that's the missing piece in college sports. So then that became Culture Wins Championships, which became Culture Wins. And really it's been taking all of their content and building it out into the sports world. So that's doing retreats, that's doing workshops, that's doing leadership, culture, communication, keynotes. So when we started that really probably started 4 years ago. I thought it'd take 5-6 years to go from 80-20 social media heavy to maybe 60-40 leadership. And I didn't have a real plan. I didn't really care how it turned out. As long as they were both growing, I was happy. Last year was probably 70-30, 75-25 leadership and culture building.
Wow.
And the social media stuff was still did really well. Leadership culture has just become more of a pressing need. And this year, gosh, I mean, it's January as we're recording this, the end of January. I just did a culture talk at a school a couple of weeks ago, doing social media here in Kansas tonight, going somewhere in a couple of weeks to do social media. I've got a bunch of social media stuff lined up, but a bunch of culture and leadership stuff lined up as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this year plays out. So it's been a pretty healthy mix, which is good because I like to do everything. So they both keep me energized, and on both of them, there's always something new to learn. It's never even though the talk and social media is generally the same because it's more about behaviors than platforms.
Right.
There's always something new going on, and it's a new audience, new campus, new travel. With leadership, even though it's a lot of the same problems that every team and organization department has, it's always different people.
Yeah.
And so that newness of all of it keeps me excited.
Yeah, I was going to say the audience for the social media absolutely it tends to be probably more the college, the student athlete versus the leadership could be a wider base. It could be the student athlete. It could be the administrators. It could, you could find yourself at Chick-fil-A at the business and talking to potential managers. I just see a wider base of who you're talking to for the leadership talks. Which one do you enjoy the most? Do you have a preference of when you're doing it? Or is the I guess with the leadership being quote unquote newer, but have you refined it as much as you've refined the social media talk already?
No, just because there's so many different things I can be talking about from a leadership perspective. And really it's a lot more customized because sometimes I may go to a school and not have a plan. It's just, what are you guys experiencing? And that leads to a number of conversations and exercises and different things.
So it gets a little bit more tailored to.
That's right. Yeah. but what I get asked that a decent amount. What do I enjoy? Which one do I prefer? Do I enjoy more? I don't know. At the end of the day, I've realized like what I'm here for is to help people get better and to believe they have a story worth telling, to believe they have value to add. And that's true and comes out in the social media piece, and that's true and comes out in the culture piece. I think with the culture piece, there's the potential to have a lot more depth. It's like we get some pretty serious conversations, sometimes in a group setting, sometimes just one-on-one coaching, and like some like real pain comes out, like real like life transformation type stuff. So for me, I love that. But it's also fun to be on stage interacting with student athletes, talking about social media. So I don't know that I enjoy either one significantly more than the other. They're both, which is a good thing for me. Like I've had a fear, maybe not a fear, but a concern, like, because the leadership stuff, it's new and it's different. Am I just going to stop caring about the social media stuff? And is that just going to die and go away? And what happens if that does? But it hasn't, and I still enjoy it. And I think that does keep growing. And I'm just thinking out loud, because I still enjoy it. I don't just go like, so I do the social media thing. Like, I'd really much rather be doing this. Like I have the energy for both.
Right. And keep in mind the thing with the social media, as the technology continues to evolve and change, that probably is going to be a trigger and a navigator for how your strategy and how your sessions go. Because, I mean, like I said, we talk about now how Facebook is just, people are like, oh my God, the privacy and this and that, and they're using my data and I'm getting off of Facebook and I'm doing this. And we don't even have to go into Snapchat, but, and what Twitter's even having. And it's just the way everything has evolved over time. It all still matters. So I've never obviously hadn't had the opportunity to hear the leadership talk, but when it jumping back into the social media one, do you still sort of like just throw your hands up when you see an article or another news story about a student athlete or a coach or professional student athlete or anybody that has retweeted, ridiculous this and that? I mean, you've been doing this now for a number of years. And you think at some point, like, you've been quoted in articles, and I mean, the media, you've been covered. So it's not like this is a mystery of what you're doing. And you think at some point people would like get some common sense, but they really sort of haven't. So do you still have those moments where like, I can't believe this is happening? Because I still see the Fieldhouse account that'll share, linebacker from XYZ college is, suspended for the team for social media use. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. I don't get surprised from a college perspective just because they're young. Yeah. And coaches would be like, gosh, how is this still happening? It's like, well, these kids don't pay attention to the same news stories that we pay attention to. Right. That's just not that's not in their worldview. And just there's also a misconception, especially with the younger generation. Well, they've been on social media so long, they get it. Like, no, they don't. They're still 18 years old. It's like they still don't get how big social media is, even though they've been on social media now 4, 5, 6, 7 years. They still don't get it. And it's been interesting because we've made this shift into athlete branding. Like, we need to get athletes their content because they are the brand ambassadors. They are the influencers. And I agree with that. Like the guys at Open Doors, I will endorse them every day because they're amazing guys, and they're all about getting content into the hands of athletes, which should be happening. I mean, I've read a blog post today with what Eric DeSalvo at Central Florida, how they've just grown their brand by empowering their athletes. So I think that's an amazing thing, but we've almost shifted too far that way and forgotten, like, hey, that's great that we can get them content. We still have to educate them. Right. Because they could put out this amazing graphic or video that the department created, and it's going to get more engagement than the department account because people are more attracted to people than brands. But if their 10 previous tweets and replies are inappropriate or immature or offensive, it doesn't matter how much traction you got off that video. Like, they've done 10 tweets of damage to the brand and to their own brand before sending that out. And so we've got to be careful with, yes, let's get them content, but let's make sure we've actually prepared them for the platform that they have. I get more surprised by professionals who are making these mistakes because they're adults and because they actually have been on social media long enough and been in the spotlight long enough and had enough media training, social media training, mental toughness training to realize like we've got to be better. But it also just shows you like no one's immune to it, whether it's an athlete or a politician or a teacher or a CEO. We saw it with the 76ers and the Colangelo stuff. Like you've got front office executives with burner accounts and spouses with burner accounts. Like, so it's, but at the pro level, it surprises me more when it's recent stuff. It's one thing, there's this new trend of like, let's pull up the tweets they sent when they were 15 and they're like 32 now. It's like, well, that's not helpful. But when it's new stuff, it's like, man, you're an adult. Like let's set a little bit of a better standard.
Do you, and I'm trying to think how I even want to ask this, because now that I'm working in a school district, I'm outside of the college world, and I think now more about how the high schoolers in particular, how they are. Because I'm like, yeah, you're going to be recruited. You're going to go to college. After that, man, you've got all the talent in the world. It's not just about college. Hey, what you're doing could ultimately lead, or have an effect on what you do after college and your behavior in college and just all that stuff. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir here as I've heard you talk about these things. But I wonder how young is too young to educate. Like, I don't know if there is something like that happening nowadays. Like I've always given the word of advice saying, hey, be careful. I think the line that you've always used, live your life, don't tweet your life, kind of thing. And I always like to throw that out too to people when they say, hey, how'd you get all the followers? Well, you can have a personality on Twitter and you can, have a little fun. But my whole thing is I want to just share useful stuff, or I want to do things that people would appreciate. And that's it. As someone that is, younger, and I see high school kids that are just tweeting left and right and they're attached to their phone. Do you ever think about the younger generation, 18 and younger, about, what the appropriate way of educating them on social media would be?
Yeah, I think there's a massive need. It's not that it's too late when they get to college, but we need to be having that conversation ahead of time. And I don't know if there's what's too young. I mean, they're on it. I mean, sure. They're on Snapchat. They're using stuff. So we went to, in between my two oldest boys' basketball games on Saturday, we went and grabbed lunch, and there's a kid, a family next to us. I asked my wife, said, how old do you think that kid is? And she was 11 or 12. He had an iPhone and was scrolling through Instagram. Jeez. He may have been 13. Who knows? I'm terrible at guessing kids' ages, but like he was not much older than our 10-year-old. Yeah. And he on an iPhone with AirPods scrolling through Instagram while his family's sitting there eating lunch. And no judgment against them. But I'm like, wow. I mean, do we know what we're actually handing kids? Right. And we don't give a 16-year-old keys to a car without proper training and proper education. You've got to pass some certain tests, and there are expectations. What are we doing with social media? Because it's far more, maybe dangerous is the right word. And I do get a little more negative when talking with high school and younger, just because it's college age. It's more, let's think about how you use it with purpose. High school, it's like, man, there's some things you need to be aware of because you just don't have the maturity level, and your parents aren't checking what you're doing. Yeah. Because parents have just given them a phone, said, for the most part, obviously generalizing, they've just given them a phone saying, good luck. It's like, you just gave your kids like access to everything on the planet, and you have no clue what they're actually getting into. So I would say that social media education, digital citizenship, whatever classes should be mandatory in high school. Yeah. They should have to, I'm thinking out loud on some of this, like obviously like every platform you have to be 13. Well, that's just a random age they picked. I'm like, right. I don't want if my kid was 13, like that, I wasn't prepared for the internet at age 13. I wasn't prepared for it when we got AOL when I was a senior in high school. I was going to say, yeah. And so we've got to be having conversations with young people. Now, I would say maybe even middle school. And we've got to be having conversations not only with the kids, but with parents. So like when I go talk to younger groups, I almost make it mandatory. I'm like, hey, let's do this in the evening and make parents, like, make it a community event.
Sure.
And make parents be involved, because they've got to be aware. And kids hate that. So I'm like, kids, I'm sorry, but your parents should know what you're doing. No, that's privacy. Like, no. If you're under their roof and you're under 18, they should have access to everything you're doing.
That's why you're dependent.
That's right. Be like, well, what about you when you had a phone in your room? Like, your parents weren't listening to your phone. I'm like, number one, yes, they were. And number two, me having a conversation with my girlfriend at 11 o'clock at night when I was in high school is not going out to the rest of the world. Right. Yeah. That's between, she can tell her friends, she can gossip. But it's like, that's not going on the internet for complete strangers to hear. Really? So I think we do. There's, and I've been trying to figure it out. I haven't put a ton of attention to it. Like, how do we scale that into the high school and younger space? Is that through video education? Because traveling around speaking to high schools, they've got different budgets. Just right. A more difficult thing to do. Right. But there's a massive need for that. Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, like I said, it's I don't know. I hear things, and I don't necessarily see anything because I'm, quite frankly, old, and I have a very narrow social media use. Like, I'm on Snapchat and I talk to the same 3 people over and over. So yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. It amazes me when I see the way kids use technology, and in good ways, because there are some kids doing very positive things. But that leads you just to think about the other side of what are the other things happening out there. So just food for thought. So
and that's the crazy part also, is like, yes, there are a lot of negatives for high school and under, but also the resources they now have access to.
Yeah.
And the creativity. Like, kids these days are crazy talented.
Yes.
And like, to be able to show them, like, hey, here's what you can do with that creativity. Here's what you can do with your talent. Here's the potential. And to tap into that in good ways, and to use their talents and their voices and like for good. Like, it's pretty wild what these kids have access to, but also just how crazy talented they are.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Coming from being in the college space and now in my role, so this will be good for you to hear, because we haven't caught up since I've made the switch. But in my role, we do advertising, and we've got marketing partners, and our high school students in their desktop publishing and their media classes, they actually assist with some of the graphic design and desktop publishing. So in the college world, SIDs do the game program and everything like that. I actually work with high school students, and they will actually, they're the designers, they're the content creators, and then they'll send it back to me for approval. I'll make sure the ads look good and everything, and I'll give them a template. But we've got some students that have literally taken that template and said, okay, yeah, we know what to do, and I get something back in 3 days. I'm like, oh my goodness, this cover is awesome. You guys did, you were creative with the content in there. You just didn't just throw the roster. You put the homecoming court in there, and you did this, and you put the upcoming events. They were thinking on their feet, and part of it was me. I had no idea what to expect, because I wasn't around high school kids on a regular basis. But now, and again, technology has changed. Everyone knows how to use Photoshop. It's a common thing, and they know the Adobe stuff. It's fantastic. So, like I said, I'm super impressed, and I'm taken back by how much I see how well they can use it and how quickly they can adapt to it. And which, I mean, that's the key. We talk about now with technology and adapting into the world and sending them off and making them ready for the next step. That's a big part, being able to adapt. So
totally. And I think with this younger generation, as with anything, they will rise or fall to the level of our expectation. So if we expect them to be immature and just dumb on social media, they will be, because we're not going to treat them as if they're capable of being better. If we expect them, hey, here's what you could be on social media, here's what we expect of you, and we actually prepare them for that.
Yeah.
And treat them that way, and not talk to them like they're a 12-year-old when they're 17. They mess up, sure, right? That's part of life. But if we say, this is what we expect from you, this is what you're capable of, they'll rise up to that level of expectation if we kind of speak that over them. And so you're right to realize the talent they have. It's like, yeah, let's call them up into that. Like, and I think Clemson, who often gets talked about as one of the best in the college sports world in terms of social media and design. Tons of college students are running their accounts.
Yeah.
It's like they've got the framework, and they say, you guys do it. Yeah. And these kids just come up with insane content. It's like, great. Well, let's take all this stuff and harness it for good.
Yeah. And then guess what? Leadership. you're creating leaders there. And I bring that back up because I'm going to go back into the leadership piece for you because of, I guess, the newest thing that has happened now, you working with Giant and Giant TV. Now, I don't even know all the details of this because I've gone to the site. I've clicked on a few things. I haven't jumped in yet because I'm like, is this up and running? But it seems to be. Talk a little bit about what Giant TV is and your role in that project and how that's evolved.
Yeah, so this is something we are super excited about. So we realized in working with organizations, large and small, number one, we know that language shapes culture. But there's an issue in how do you scale language? How do you scale learning into an organization? Because everyone's just really, really busy. So how do you do leader development and scale that in the 21st century? I think we're in the 21st century. In this time, in the digital age, like how do you do learning in the digital age as the workforce is changing, as organizations are changing? The come in and sit through a seminar or leave and go to a seminar, that style is just changing, which I think is a good thing. So we try to figure out how do we help organizations scale their learning? So we created this thing called Giant TV, and it's out right now. It's really just we're testing it out. Okay. The official launch is March 28th.
Okay.
And because we've got a book coming out that date, we're doing a global leadership summit that date. So it's all kind of part of one big launch. So right now, what Giant TV is, and even we launched it in November, and even since then, we've already changed what we believe and are seeing the platform as. So number one, we launched it as the Netflix of leader development. So we've got content on communication. Like we do this thing called 5 Voices. We built it out of Myers-Briggs, which is really good, but really hard to scale into a team. So we built 5 Voices, which is much easier to use in a team. So we've got organizations and sports teams around the globe using this thing called 5 Voices, where you can go, we have a 5 Voices assessment at 5voices.com. That's free. Or you can go on Giant TV and watch several videos to help you discover your leadership voice. And then it's got a series of videos of what's your personal development plan. So if you're a connector, for example, which is one of the voices, what's a plan for you to get better? What are things you can do? What are things you can work on to raise your influence? Then we've got a voice on how to engage, or a series on how to engage each voice. So if you're talking to a connector, what are some things you can say to them to help communicate better? We've got content on work-life balance. Trying to think, we've got something we call the communication code. Right now, as we sit here on January 28th, there's over $30,000 worth of content on Giant TV.
Wow.
That we would, if you were like to bring someone out to do all this stuff with your organization, it'd be over $30,000, and it's $8.99 a month. So cheaper than Netflix. But here's where it gets crazy. So we've already got, there's probably 150 videos up right now. By March 28th, I think we'll have over 500. We're going to have a series on so you want to be a speaker. Like practical things to think of if you want to be a speaker. We've got team exercises, 3 to 4 minute videos that you can watch with your team and do a lunch and learn that could lead to great discussion. We've got a leadership toolkit that we use. All the videos are on there. We're going to create voice channels. So if you're a connector, we'll have a channel for your leadership voice with 14 to 16 videos, basically your personal leadership coach. Getting real deep into your leadership, your personality, your wiring, and how to get healthier, be a better leader. But here's where it gets crazy. All that stuff's really good and fun. We've realized that what Giant TV really is a platform to help organizations develop what we call 100X leaders. So the book coming out March 28th from the guys that run Giant is called The 100X Leader. It's about getting as close to 100% health as you can as a leader. Are you secure? Are you confident? Are you humble? Are you self-aware? And then the X is learning to multiply that. Everything's about trying to be a better leader. Nobody's talking about how do you multiply your leadership, because great leaders develop great leaders. So that's what the book is about. And the idea is if you want to climb Mount Everest, you've got to have a Sherpa. Sherpa are the people who live on Everest. And when mountain season opens, they summit Everest and they lay out all the trails, all the bridges, all the ladders. Then they come back down and they help you up because they know what it takes.
Right.
They say, you don't even know where you're going. I'm going to show you the way. I'm going to give you the support you need, the challenge you need. If you've gone too far, hey, you're not ready for this. You need to go back down. So you've got, and nobody talks about the Sherpa. We talk about the person who's summited Everest. It's like nobody talks about the actual hero. So your job as a leader is to know what it takes to climb the mountain and then to come back and help your people get to the next level. So that's what the book is about. We've realized that Giant TV is going to help organizations. Now it's going to become a learning management system, an LMS, where it scales these learnings across an organization. So when you go sign up in March, it's going to have you do what we call blueprint. You're going to answer a series of questions. Here's your pain point. Okay, here's a path to help your pain. Watch this video, do this assessment, do this worksheet, watch this video. Because right now, if you log in, if you don't know anything about our content, it's a little bit overwhelming. So right. I don't know what to do with any of this stuff, but we're going to give you a path. Organizations can create their own paths. So when you hire someone, here's your onboarding path. In your first 30 days, watch these 2 videos, take this worksheet, and then watch this video. If someone's struggling with communication, or if they're struggling with insecurity or drama, well, here's a path to help rid that on your team. So it becomes this learning management system where paths are created. It tracks all the data. Hey, man, we've talked to you about this. Like, we have a system for you to get better. You've not watched any of the videos. And so it's crazy. And we're seeing organizations with like 7, 8, 10,000 people sign up their entire organization.
That's cool.
Because you can put your content up there as well.
Right.
So like, let's say the school district's like, you have your own culture surveys that you want to do. Great. Well, we're going to have surveys in there so you can see here's where our culture is now. Well, 6 months in with this Giant TV thing, now our culture is here. But you can put your own assessments in there, your own surveys, your own videos eventually. And so it's pretty wild what it's going to become.
So you've built, for lack of a better term, a pretty robust professional development tool that covers, I mean, that's a pretty wide, talking really is difficult this evening. A pretty wide range of things, which is awesome. Like looking at it, I didn't get that. Again, I didn't dive into it, but the way you describe it is like perfect. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not there yet. So when you log in now, you see none of that stuff, right? You just see a bunch of videos, which are all really good on their own. It'll be great for an individual, but to have that as an organization, it's just basically gonna be a series of apps. Okay. Where like here's videos, here's data, here's assessments, here's the blueprint, and it just it will scale learning into an organization, which is a huge issue. Like this was good, but how do we get it to our people? It's hard to schedule a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour workshop. Yeah. Great. Have them watch this. Go have them watch it at home with their families, because then they get healthier at home as well. And again, if it's if you're talking to a leader, it's like, well, we don't have budget to invest in our people. You can't invest $9 a month in each person. Like tell that to your people.
Right.
Yeah, we could have done this for you, but I don't want to pay $9 a month for you. It's like, good grief. So we've made it really affordable. Like the amount of stuff it will have for $9 a month is pretty insane.
I like how you phrase it as like Netflix of development. That's awesome.
That's right. So little promo on that. If people want, so right now you can get 30 days free if you go to giant.tv/Kevin DeShazo. So just my name. It's 7 days free if you just sign up at giant.tv. But if you use my code, you get 30 days free and cancel it. Like, go watch $30,000 worth of content, and if you don't like it, cancel it. You can cancel it anytime. But I would definitely recommend just going and checking it out. I genuinely think it will change how organizations do leader development in the future.
Nice. And you said launch date is in March?
Yes, they can go now.
Okay.
The stuff's already up there, but
Gotcha.
the official launch date where a bunch of all this new stuff will be out will be in March.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad you cleared it up, because like I said, I wanted to ask about it, because I was kind of like, I've seen you tweet about it. I've seen it, pop up, and I've visited the site, but very cool. Very cool. Sounds like it's been a lot of work. I mean, knowing that you probably had a big hand in doing the technical development of it, right?
Yes, I'm very detail oriented. Now, here's what's crazy. We partnered with some guys out of Florida, and they kind of get the DNA of who we are and what they do. Yeah. And it's been crazy to see how fast they've innovated and how much they're like, hey, what if we did this? And what if we did this? Because as big as we thought, they're like, no, go bigger. Yeah. So it's been crazy to see how they dream, but also how they just knock stuff out. It's been crazy.
Nice. All right. Before I let you go, I've got to let you know that. So for folks that don't know Kevin, many of them do, because you may see him on Instagram or on Twitter, that he is an avid runner. And it's almost like a personal thing where you use it to clear your mind, get out there and, hit the reset button kind of thing. And if you would have talked to me back in 2016, late 2016, you would have been like, yeah, I hated running. I did not like any form of it. And something happened in 2017 where I was like, all right, this is fine, I guess. And then I started going outside, and I really enjoyed running outside. We have this cool park that's around the lake, Creve Coeur Lake Park, for folks here in the St. Louis area. But that's like my go-to. Of course, it is not my go-to in January or February when the wind chills are negative degrees. But it's one of my common parks I like to go run at. But I really fell in love with it because, it is something that is like a clear your mind get kind of thing. But then I sort of like just kept doing it, and I was consistent with it. And I found myself like, I think I can run 3 miles without stopping now. And it just sort of happened. Like I wasn't like training for anything. I was just running for the sake of, it's a good workout, but it's, good time to clear the head, do something different, and not be on the computer, not be on Twitter, all that stuff. So you were the inspiration for me. And then fast forward through to October of 2017, I finally, for the first time in my life, at least that I can remember, I don't think I did it in high school. I know I didn't do it in college because I hated running in college. But I ran a complete 3.1 miles, and I did it also in under 30 minutes. So I'm thinking to myself, did I just do that? Like, and it just sort of happened. I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, oh, wow, I did it. So I was like, I think I could run a 5K, an official one, a timed one. So I took the plunge, and I did do that in October of 2018, ran my first one. And I still have my questions about the course layout and if they actually measured it right, because my Fitbit told me one thing than what the finisher certificate said. But I'm not going to argue, because the finisher certificate said that I did 3.1 miles in like 28:45. So it's a pretty nice personal badge for me there. But you're like, I would never run with you because I'm going to I can't keep up with you looking at your times on that you share all the time. But it really does work. Like that's like become a thing for me too. Now I go to the treadmill. It's not as great, but you get out there. You told me before we started recording, 40 degrees or higher, you're off and running.
Yeah. And for me, it's the same thing, right? So, and it goes back to, we have a concept, what got me into running. We do a session with teams, or we have a system we help implement called 5 Gears. It's about work-life balance. And work-life balance is a myth. It's really about being in the right gear at the right time. There's a time for work. There's a time for connecting. But we also have to recharge. We can't be at our best if we're empty. And most of us are way overworked. We're exhausted. And so we're not giving our best to people. And I realized my personality. So first gear is that recharge gear. How do you recharge? How do you get rest? And I just realized I'm terrible at it. Part of it's my personality. I don't do first gear well. Part of it was just the way my life was just structured. It was non-existent. Like I've got to figure out something. Grew up playing basketball. Running is punishment. So I could never figure out why people ran for pleasure like that. That doesn't, there's a disconnect there. People are just nuts. I enjoyed cycling, but some friends of mine in Oklahoma City did the Oklahoma City Marathon one year. This is, as I'm looking at Strava to go back just to judge times, this was in like April 2015. And even though I couldn't fathom running, in my mind, I'm like, I'd love to do a marathon someday, like just to complete it. Like that'd just be awesome.
Yeah.
And so some friends did the half marathon that day. We're hanging out afterwards. Like it's a huge party day in Oklahoma City. We shut down streets. We went to a friend's house that was on the course, and we got music blaring. We were cooking a big breakfast. Just crazy time. Afterwards, we all go hang out, and we're talking to the 2 or 3 guys who had done the half. And I'm like, man, that'd be fun to do someday. Like, oh, let's do it next year. I'm like, yeah, that sounds terrible, actually. And then I'm like, but I'd love to do a sprint triathlon. So let's just take this to a new level, because a triathlon seems insane, but a sprint triathlon is pretty short. It's usually swimming like 500-ish yards, biking 10 to maybe 15, 18 miles, depends on there's no standard distance, and then running a 5K. I'm like, that could be kind of cool. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And some of them had done them before. I was like, all right, well, the next one coming up was like in 6 weeks. And I had been cycling at the time, but that was it. So I wasn't worried about riding. Running, I was terrified of. Swimming, I hadn't been swimming in years. I swam a lot in college. I was like, I'll figure that out. I mean, swimming, not that difficult. So I went on my first run. So I'm going back. This is May 12th, 2015. And like, I'm a skinny guy. And like, people seem like, oh, you're in shape. I'm like, I'm not in shape. I'm just skinny. And like, how do you say that? There's a difference.
Yeah.
Like, man, like, how do you stay in shape? I'm like, oh, it's a steady diet of stress and coffee. If you start a business, like, you're just going to be stressed out and you drink a lot of coffee and the weight stays off. So that was my secret for a long time. I'll be charging for an online course for that secret later on. But I go out with a buddy of mine. I'm like, all right, we just got to get a mile in. Surely I can run a mile. I made it 4 blocks and I thought my life was ending. I remember being 4 blocks from my house and I am like hunched over. I'm like, I'm dead. Like, will you please call an ambulance? I'm going to need a ride back to my house. Like, this is embarrassing. But my first mile, I ran 1.2 miles that day, 9:27 pace. And I'm not judging anyone's speed. Like, for some people, like, that's super fast. A few days later, I ran 1.6 miles and I got slower. I was at a 9:42 pace. Well, so then the sprint triathlon comes around and I committed to it. So I had to do it. So here we are. And it's a 500-yard swim that day, which nearly killed me, by the way, because I couldn't figure out how to breathe. Key to swimming is you got to breathe. And so I backstroked that swim to like nobody's business. Because freestyle, I'm like, I'm going to drown. So I just went backstroke for most of that. The ride was only 11 miles, which is nothing. Like, I usually don't get on a bike for under 20 miles. 11 miles. It was crazy windy that day and hilly, like out in western Oklahoma. So the bike ride was 11 miles of just pure misery. And then you have to run a 5K. I had not run. This is my personality. So buddy of mine, we're polar opposite personalities. And he's like, man, what's your training plan? I'm like, training plan? What's a training plan? I was like, I'll run today maybe and get on the bike at some point and we'll see if I got time to get in the pool. What's your training plan? And he's got this spreadsheet, right? Like, today I'm going to run this and swim this. I'm like, oh, that sounds boring. So the day of the sprint try, I had not run a 5K.
Oh boy.
So my first 5K was after swimming for 500 yards and 11-mile bike ride. That 5K, my pace was 10 minutes and 4 seconds per mile. Took me 31 minutes, 11 seconds. And my goal was to be under 30 minutes. So I failed miserably. But at some point along the way, like, it clicked. Like, running became my, not escape, right? It's like, that's how I recharge, how I rest. Like, it's how I kind of figure out, what am I doing in life? And now I can feel tension and anxiety like building if I don't run. I'm like, my wife's like, hey, you need to go run. I'm like, yeah, I got to get out of the house. Yeah. So like yesterday, I ran 4 and I usually, like, I'll probably do a 5K a week. So I run once or twice a week, usually on the weekends, maybe during the week, depending on the day. But I don't go less than 3.2. That's kind of been my standard. But I'm not going 6, 8, 10 miles. Like, it's somewhere between 3.2 and 5 usually. Sometimes I've done a couple 10Ks. But yesterday I ran 4.3 miles, 7:07 pace. But it's also great temperature. So like, the cooler it is, the faster I go.
Yes.
If I run that same 5K in July, like, it's not good. For me.
I've learned that quickly because the first day that I actually ran 3.1 in under 30 minutes, it was October. It was like 70 degrees, no humidity, and I was moving. Like, I could have probably run another mile or two and been perfectly fine. Like, I mean, my legs were fine. It was like one of those perfect storm kind of days. days where I was just like moving. When I actually did an official 5K this past October, I thought it was, you'd say October. It's St. Louis. But you think it's going to be October. It's going to be nice. It's going to be cool. And the 5K starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. So even better. Nope. It was about 87 degrees to start, and it was warm, and it was a hilly path and everything like that. But I still did it because I was prepared a little bit, and they had water and all that stuff. But I mentally was prepared that I told myself, I'm not walking any part of this. I'm running it. Now, that was also a little bit of adrenaline because it was an official one. You get the bib, and it's timed. So it was just like more of a personal thing where I'm like, man, I really now like running for some reason. I don't understand why. Like for me, running had to be with a ball on a basketball court and with other people trying to guard me. And that was running. That was my workout. Now I realize, well, I still like playing basketball. I don't play it enough, but man, I can get a workout and still do something different and clear the head and just take a break. Even better when the weather's great to go out and do it. So, you saying all this, I'm just saying you were an inspiration because I'm like, I'm not going to get to your pace, but that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it.
That's the piece. It doesn't matter. Like
right.
You did it. And that's the thing I've realized with running, and you just hit it, is like, I love cycling. Well, I'm not getting on the bike unless it's going to be at least 2 hours. I don't generally I've got young kids. I don't want to if I travel a lot, I'm busy during the week. I don't want to bail on my wife for 2 hours on a Saturday.
Right.
And probably more like 2.5 to 3, because you're going to have to drive out somewhere where you're going to start your ride, and it never is as short as you think it is. Yeah. And it's like, even going to the gym, well, that's going to take an hour and probably all this time. I can just put on shoes and a T-shirt and shorts and go run, and I'm back in 30 minutes.
Right.
It's not a burden on anyone. Quick shower, I can go back about my day. And so for me, like I pay attention to times just because I've started to get a little more competitive within myself. Like I don't compare to other people. It's like, man, I want to get faster. I want to get better. But the thing with running, I've realized like it's such it impacts so many other areas just in terms of like mental. It's like, because running is such a mental thing. Yes. Because you're like, I'm dead. My legs are falling. And it's also weird because there's typically no rhyme or reason to why you have a good or bad run. It's like some days I'm like, I feel great mentally, and I go out and like my legs feel like they're 8,000 pounds. I can't breathe. What's happening? And some days I go out and like, I could run 20 miles. I've never done it, but I'm pretty sure I could do it today.
It's so funny.
But it's such a mental thing. Yeah. Because like it's just, there are times I'm like, I can make it the next block. I can make it the next block. And so it's like it's even those are just wins, getting to the next block, the next block, the next block, and eventually you've run a 5K or whatever. But it's such a mental thing. I find myself wrestling with myself you can't do this, you're going to quit, you suck, you're a failure, like you can't even run a mile today. I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. And so like just the ability to fight through that, I think pays off in so many other areas. Yeah. I every time I feel the thing vibrate, which tells me it's been a mile, I'm like, okay, I can make it another one. Oh, okay, that's 2 miles. Okay, I can make it another one. Oh, that's been 3. All right, I guess I can definitely make it a 10th. All right, I can keep going. Wow, okay. It just sort of like happens. I mean, and I can't explain it at all, but I've just like literally like just flocked to it, and I don't know why. So I'm like itching. I can't wait for the weather to turn to run outside again and not in a gym. That's the one thing I haven't overcome, by the way, is running on a treadmill versus running outside, because it's so much easier to run outside. So. I can't. I don't even try. I hate running on a treadmill. Can't do it. What I found to be beneficial lately. So I use the Strava app to keep track of my running. I also use the Nike Run app. Yeah. I don't really have a reason for why I use both. Sometimes one of them dies, and so mostly I guess to kind of keep. Surely one of them is going to last through the run. But Nike has partnered with Headspace, which is like a meditation app that the NBA uses. A bunch of people, but they have Headspace runs. And usually I listen to music. I've never been listen to a podcast and run, but it's usually been music. But I've started doing Headspace runs, and it's mostly just talking you through breathing and just being aware of your surroundings and talking about barriers and breakthroughs. It's been fascinating to do it, because the first time I was like, this is going to be terrible. Like, this is just a lot of silence. Yeah. I've found my runs when I use Headspace are almost perfectly consistent, like my times and my miles. Whereas other times it could go like I could be 8 seconds slower this mile, 20 seconds faster, like kind of up and down. With Headspace, I've been more consistent, feel a little clearer mentally. But to your point of like, oh, I made it a mile, I can go another mile and another mile. There's a last run I had. It was a Headspace run. They're talking about this idea of breakthroughs, like, oh, I broke through the 3.2 barrier. It's like, you broke through like the half mile and the 1 mile. It's like every time you're like, oh, I can't do it. No, sure I can. Like that's the breakthrough. Yeah. And that big breakthrough of a 5K or a 10K or whatever, it's like, well, that's the result of all these other little breakthroughs. And it's like, that's really what running is. It's just a series of breakthroughs that lead to bigger breakthrough.
Yep. I agree. And I can feel it like mentally, like, and physically, mind you, too, because like I can tell I'm in better condition because like I didn't run after I did the 5K in October. Took a little bit of time off just because I didn't want to overdo the knees and all that stuff. And it was getting colder. But I went back to the gym a couple weeks ago. I was kind of like, man, I haven't been on a treadmill forever. This could be rough. And I ran the first mile and it went awful, but I did not run the complete 3 miles on it. But it took me a week and a half to get back to the pace where I was running a 5K in under 30 minutes. So I was kind of like, okay, I can still keep that up. So my goal this year, and I guess I'm saying this and I'm recording it, so I got to hold myself to it. I've told some people this though, but I guess everybody will know. My goal this year is to run 2 5Ks this year. I want to do one in the spring before it gets too hot, and then I might do the same 5K I did last year. We'll see. But one in the spring and then one in the fall. That's my goal in 2019. So now people will I've set this and recorded it. And when I publish it, people will know that I've got something to hold myself to. So if I actually do 2 5Ks this year, goal accomplished. So there you go.
I love it.
Well, sir, I really appreciate you taking time to do this. It's been great to catch up. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So I appreciate you taking time to chat with me here on, this clever name of Persons of Interest of this podcast.
I love it. It's been good to reconnect, catch up, and just chat.